you are watching or listening to Jade Emerald Green. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and follow so that you are staying connected with the daily content arrivals that are made just for you. Thank you. Hello, good morning. Today is Saturday, June 28th, 2025. This is the Daily Collective Tarot and Oracle reading on Jade Emerald Green. Hey, it is bright and early and I've had some rest, so I want to get into it with these transits today. We have Mercury trine Neptune, so that's a great time for creative expression, creative communication, creative events. What better creative event than for, if you are in the Milwaukee area, to come down to Bremen Cafe this afternoon for Saturdays, which is a house and techno day party. So come on down from 1 to 5 p.m., 901 East Clark Street in River West, Milwaukee. And after that little shameless plug, let's get into these transits. Again, we have Mercury opposing Pluto. So Pluto is one of those planets that are so far out that and their cycle is so slow that it deals with more so the collective than the individual, meaning like in any given transit, a lot of people can have their sign in any given transit because it's like generational. Mercury is a more personal planet because it has a shorter cycle. When these two are in opposition to each other, that is a time of tension. That is a time of kind of like dealing with challenging communications that kind of deal with the greater, that deals with the collective, so to speak. But it can feel more personal because of, depending on, how we're dealing with the communication. So if you're feeling a level of tension, if you're feeling a level of resentment, if you're feeling a level of paranoia, particularly later on in the day, just know you are not alone. Handle yourself with care. Do the things that are relaxing to you so that you are not communicating from those more challenging emotions, and you have a time to really process what's happening before responding. Okay, so if this is your first time on this channel, let me quickly go over here what we're doing and how we're doing it. I have a mix of tarot and oracle cards that have been pulled from ahead of doing this reading. I have a total of about 11 decks that I work with, but we used about like 7 or 8 today for this. The way I do the tarot reading is I ask 6 questions that are kind of based off of the situation, action, outcome spread, but are expanded and stylized. Our very first question will always be, what the fuck are we doing here? That's our situation card. Followed by our checking in with our recommended course of action, aka what the fuck we're supposed to do about it. Our action to avoid, where's the fuckery? Then going into our likely outcome cards, what happens when we do what the fuck we're supposed to do? Likely outcome based off of the recommended action. And what the fuck fuckery, which is our likely outcome based off of the action to avoid. And as always, we will have a clarifier, basically a card to provide more context as to the situation we find ourselves in as a collective. Then we move on into the oracle cards. I have several decks from the Prism deck that deals with more color coding, keywords. I have a celebrity spirit oracle deck, so we focus on one personality from that deck to assist us in our frame of mind. Then I pull from one card each from the What's the Tea and the Broken Mirrors deck, which deals with more contemporary concepts and situations that are very relatable. Then we go into our Dark Confessions oracle, which deals with different statements that indicate various frames of minds that someone may be in, but perhaps wouldn't stay in under any normal circumstance, at least. Then we have our angelic connections, so we try to see where our protective energy is coming from in that case. And then finally we have a timing oracle deck, which kind of where we, you know, after we've gone through the cards, we simply have a question formulated from the reading, and we just simply ask what is our expected timeline from that. It's a little experimental. I try not to be so predictive, especially when these like collective readings are coming in. But it's good to just have a better sense of like, okay, yeah, how do we navigate? You know, what is our sense of timing? And, you know, all of this is ultimately about timing. You know, what our actual timing ends up being does vary from individual to individual, but I don't know, it's interesting. I still like it. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into these pools. Okay, all right. All right. Excuse me, I'm, well, I had to burp, but then, so I have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 cards that I go through on any given day. Okay, so for our what the fuck are we doing here? We have a 6 of Cups. That's coming around again, but in a different position. And then for what the fuck we're supposed to do about it, we have the 3 of Swords. For our where's the fuckery, we have the Hermit. What happens when we do what the fuck we're supposed to do? We have the 9 of Swords. For what the fuck fuckery, we have the Emperor. And for our clarifier, we have the 9 of Cups. Okay, so let's start off into these tarot reads here. What the fuck are we doing here? Are we back in nostalgia land? Are we back in the past? There's some memory or some previous experience that it's centered our attention. It's centered in our mind somehow. And it is affecting what we're doing right now. It could be affecting how we think we should approach something right now, but something tells me that even though this looks like a pleasant card of, you know, exchanging flowers from the home and our youth, I feel like there's a heavier element, and perhaps it's because these times are long gone and we're dealing with the realities of today. And as we grow up and once we realize like what life really is, I don't know, I'm Spirit brings these songs to me, and so I'm thinking of Ahmad back in the days. Like, you know, I'm not gonna sing it here for the purposes of this read, but I am wondering if we're feeling like that though. Like, sometimes we just wish that things would go back to the way they were. But there's a precise reason why things are not going to go back to the way that they were. Sometimes, you know, things need to evolve. Other times, things need to dissolve. Especially if they're no longer grounded in truth. Especially if it's no longer grounded in anything that is hopeful to our growth. Sometimes we need to let the past be the past and, you know, have acceptance of what our present is, even if it doesn't feel good, even if it's not pretty. What the fuck are we supposed to be doing? 3 of Swords is not an easy card to, you know, like think of as like, okay, no, we need to take on that action. We need to process the levels of disappointment we may be feeling, of heartbreak that we may be feeling. I'm not necessarily thinking that this is like a exclusive to any form of romantic element. You know, sometimes this can deal with power. Sometimes this can deal with, or power struggles more so. Sometimes this can just simply deal with like illusions and becoming disillusioned. You get what I'm saying? So, fully accepting that and naming it for what it is. How else are we supposed to get through it if we don't do those things? How else are we supposed to get on the other side of like where we're supposed to be with ourselves, the way we want to be with ourselves, unless we confront this heartbreak, this disappointment? Where's the fuckery? The Hermit is a great card to represent going inward for an expanse of our spiritual inner knowing, to better understand our purpose in life. We have to go within. But having that spiritual stillness is not the same as avoidance. It's not the same as ghosting either yourself or ghosting other people more commonly. The Hermit has its place, and in a lot of situations people need to be utilizing their Hermit element more. But in this position, we can't hide. We can't hide. We can't go into hiding. It is essential that we, like I said, we name things for what they are, even if they hurt us. And we have to honor that experience. We got to give it the respect, even when it's like, even when we're experiencing disrespect. Because I imagine, like, I can't think of a situation where Three of Swords comes up and there has not been some form of disrespect. You get what I'm saying? Or like lack of consideration that someone has for you. You get what I'm saying? Like, there's power in naming things as they are. We have the Nine of Swords for what happens when we do what the fuck we're supposed to do. Look, healing hurts. Okay? Healing can fucking hurt. Sometimes healing doesn't happen in a linear style or fashion. Sometimes we zigzag. Sometimes it can take on any shape, basically. But it's essential. We have to confront our worst fears based off of the heartbreak and disappointment. Sometimes our worst fears is ourselves. Other times the worst fear is someone else doing some fuck shit, that you don't want to have to deal with, because there's so many better, more, worthwhile things you could potentially be doing. But no, like, the last time we came up, this card came up, we did break down the imagery as used in the Pulp Tarot, which is this deck. We do have their version of the Five of Swords that's hanging up in the background. Five of Swords, for those who are not familiar, deals with situations where we are either the person or experiencing a person, a set of people, or an entity that is attempting to win at all costs. Will not rule out using underhanded methods to get what they want, right? So dealing with like the lesser elements of humanity, sometimes the worst elements of humanity, you get what I'm saying? But the Nine of Swords and our likely outcome position based off of the recommended action is actually pretty good, because ultimately we're dealing with our own worst fears. The Swords at the end of the day is about our state of mind. It doesn't also always necessarily mean that our worst fears will be realized, but it's something that is like, okay, we need to at least acknowledge what is possible in order to heal. And we also need to come through it in a way where we acknowledge, you know, our thought process and maybe even our feelings, but we don't let our feelings become facts, which has been a really important theme across these days and these readings. Like, what is our perception of things versus the reality of the situation? You get what I'm saying? So, in our what the fuck fuckery, we don't want to hide and be avoided and ghost, because we don't want to end up in a situation where our outcome is one that is the shadow side of the emperor, which is like rigidity, which is like unnecessary forcefulness. Like, you get what I'm saying? Like, the emperor in its shadow side isn't really helping the kingdom at all. Like, you're either you know, at worst just simply set in your ways and you're not growing, or at best you're set in your ways and you're not growing, and at worst you're just like a straight up tyrant. Like, you don't want that, you know, because you are having a hard time with acknowledging the Three of Swords, acknowledging the heartbreak, acknowledging the disappointment for what it is. You get what I'm saying? You gotta name it so that it doesn't control you, and then you're like fighting for a sense of control back over it, and but you're not like acknowledging what really needs to be acknowledged, which is your pain. Somebody has to acknowledge your pain, and if you don't acknowledge it, at least in a way that's more so healthy than not, then nobody gonna want to be around you. You don't want to be like the emperor with no clothes, essentially, is the archetype that I'm getting at with this what the fuck fuckery card. What it's ultimately all about, though, is our sense of emotional fulfillment, our sense of being complete within ourselves emotionally, to have a feeling of like, okay, you know, I can be comfortable in my own skin. I can relax even with these problems that I've, you know, acquired, or problems that I've experienced. You know, like, I don't know if I've said this, I perhaps have already, but true happiness is not the absence of problems. It is the ability to overcome them, to be able to master conflict resolution, to be able to have a sense of like justice, you know, for ourselves, so that, you know, we don't let these things keep us from being able to feel relaxed and not feel guarded. You know, there's like, yes, it is a cruel, cold world, but we don't want to be so caught up in that aspect of life that we forget that we're also here to enjoy ourselves. Like I said yesterday, the purpose of life is to be happy, period. Like, you know, we just got to get through the things that are not so comfortable at times. Alrighty, so moving on into our oracle pools here for our Prism Oracle. I really like this. We got movement and cleanse. You know, you know, when our Heath Ledger card comes up, at times, you know, we have to say the show must go on. Then I'm getting that energy from these two. You know, that's why we can't engage in our shadow hermit. We can't avoid, we can't ghost, because things need to move. Very important things need to move. Our pain needs to move around. We have to transform our pain into power. And that's how we cleanse too, is to be able to take our obstacles and you know, be able to yay, like, I got it, you know, and figure out how you do, you know, your formula, so to speak. How you're able to affect magic, you know, and the magic is in like transforming doubt, whether it's doubt over yourself or doubt over the situation, being able to move from being a problem to now a memory or an accomplishment that, you know, sometimes we don't know if we can achieve unless we have a solid sense of self, which, you know, we all like to say we think we have, but sometimes, you know, we could be more vulnerable, and that's okay. But as long as you're able to, you know, keep that movement going and know when to like kind of wash your hands of something, you know, how can you be stopped? Now, for today's celebrity spirit oracle, it is not without controversy. I think a lot, I don't know who's not without controversy, and this is like, but we have David Bowie, and it says, take time to play and explore. So I knew songs of David Bowie without knowing who he was until not when he passed, but in the time right before he passed. And then when he passed, it was just like all this discourse just about like life, legacy, separating the art from the artist, things of that nature. And I think that's an important conversation to continue to have. I think in the scope of this specific reading, and also learning about the challenges of like one's life, like as to like what it took for them to, you know, become the person that they were known as, right? I think, yeah, everyone has like that story of like coming up despite all odds. Like, what is your despite all odds story? Is essentially what I'm trying to get at. Like, you know, like what is something that ultimately it would be thought of as impossible? And you know, I think I really also have on my mind the spirit of Dr. Daisaku Ikeda. So Dr. Daisaku Ikeda was the third president of the Soka Gakkai International, which is the Value Creation Society, and it's the Buddhist organization that I'm a part of. And it is, he was the type of person that would, like, any obstacle, and this person faced like excommunication, you know, like having to step down from, you know, one's position, like having to do all those things because of persecution. You get what I'm saying? And so, but I don't know, like his spirit is also coming up because to be able to handle all these problems, and sometimes multiple problems, you know, when it rains it pours, you know, they come in at multiple times, multiple problems come in at once is what I'm trying to say. One can definitely crumble or they can rise and dance. You get what I'm saying? And I guess that's what I'm getting at. Like, you know, if you can do a dance, you know, literally, metaphorically, get creative. This is the time of creativity. Use that Mercury trine Neptune to find creative solutions. You get what I'm saying? You know, to these problems, so that it's not bringing you down. Like, I'm sure that there is nothing more that someone would like than to see your defeat. You can't let that happen because you still have a purpose in life. You still have a mission. You have to be able to know that these problems, you know, like how are your problems benefiting you? Ultimately is the question. So that's why, you know, even in the midst of our problems, we have to take time to play and explore the things that are still relevant to like our purpose. You get what I'm saying? I just so happen to be a creative, so I, you know, like I am going to use creative expression to, you know, like have that sense of exploration, you know, to be able to overcome our obstacles, you know. So that is just my format. But some people don't necessarily have an outright creative mind, but everyone's good at something. So find what you're good at and use that to assist you in solving, you know, your more challenging problems, or to at least have an outlet to blow off some steam so that you can think more clearly. So yeah, it's time to play and explore. Ooh, sorry. Okay, moving on to our What's the Tea I'm dead at this imagery though. Like, bad karma. I want to start off by saying that all karma is just karma. And I'm saying this as a big, like, all karma is just karma. Good and bad are adjectives that inform us in a way, like on a certain level. But ultimately, because karma is just simply action. That's the meaning of it. The meaning of the word karma is action, and from Sanskrit, action. So when we think of like what determines like good karma and what determines bad karma, I mean it's the same debate as to like what is good or bad, or is there good or bad. It's based off of societal judgment, or what we've collectively decided, or not the personal we, but the royal we, so to speak. What was already decided way before we came into the world and could even talk and have comprehension of what the fuck the concept of life is, So I don't know. I wanted to acknowledge that macro sense, because in I'm saying like super macro, like most general terms. Like, what are our definitions, right? Because yes, there is, like, in the most practical terms, when we're dealing with like everyday life situations, there are actions that are preferred to be taken over other actions. You get what I'm saying? And based off of that preference, that royal we preference, that royal we didn't ask me preference, that's how we get to that determination of like what is a good cause or a bad cause, what is a good effect or a bad effect. Now, I think for those who don't practice Buddhism, I think there's a misperception that like once there's something bad, like a bad cause or a bad effect, like once things just start getting bad, that's just how it is. That's how it is forever. Like there's not a lot of hope for transformation. And I think a lot of people, we start to see a lot of people in a more distorted lens when we don't make room for the possibility of transformation, because we when we don't make room for like things like redemption, or like clearing up misunderstandings, even, because not everything is necessarily about like, oh, I have to redeem myself. Sometimes people think the worst of you, but they got it fucked up. You get what I'm saying? So what I'm trying to get at is that you can always transform things that are thought of as bad karma into amazingly stellar karma, great karma. You get what I'm saying? That's the real beauty of karma when one practices Buddhism, is to have that awareness. That it's particularly within Mahayana Buddhism, more specifically within Nichiren Buddhism, because it is based off of the Lotus Sutra. The Lotus Sutra, well, let's be clear, because I am going to give it a whole history lesson. I don't give a fuck. Since we got this car. I'm going to be quick with it, though. So the historical Buddha is thought to have first obtained enlightenment by sitting under the Bodhi tree. Like, that's what we think of when he was in ancient, which is really Nepal. People just assume it's India, but he was technically a part of Nepal, what is modern day Nepal. Known as a prince, went out to the world, saw suffering, and was trying to figure out like, okay, how do we make suffering like not a thing, right? And so he's thought of as sitting under this tree, meditating, realizing that he was an enlightened person. from that specific form. But as he spent the subsequent decades of his life teaching the concepts of Buddhism and expounding it. Now, number one, this happened in a time prehistoric to like having written text. So much like in Africa, where there was like a griot, you know, people would receive these teachings orally and would have to repeat it over and over and over again in order to, you know, have it, you know, and it memorized by heart. And then they would, you know, do that cycle so that it wouldn't be lost if somebody died or somebody, you know, just fucked off. You know, you get what I'm saying? Like, so as he was teaching this, he first was like, oh, I first obtained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. But the reality of, you know, at the pinnacle of his teaching, he shared that I have been a Buddha since time without beginning. That was his realization, his true realization. But the reason why he didn't first say that, when he first started, you know, sharing this philosophy with others, was because sign of the times, people weren't ready. If you know anything about India, you know, historic India and also contemporary India, you know that there's a caste system in place. So basically, whatever caste you're born into, it's often thought of that you have to, you know, be born and die over many lifetimes in order to come out of that caste, to escalate the caste system, so to speak. So, you know, like, the people weren't fucking ready. But eventually, you know, before his passing, he was able to expound like the ultimate law of the teaching, which is, you know, the Lotus Sutra, that he attained. Number one, he attained Buddhahood many lifetimes ago. He attained enlightenment many lifetimes ago. And that too, that everyone has the potential to tap into their innate Buddhahood without exception, meaning that women, you know, who were often thought of as unable to be enlightened, could definitely be Buddhists. You know, the beetle down the street, hiding under the tree, Buddha. The Rock, Buddha. Now, I'm not talking about Dwayne Johnson. I'm talking about like an actual, like, rock. You get what I'm saying? So, Buddha. Evil people, Buddhas. Like, everyone has the power to transform their negative karma into positive karma. So when I want to look at this again, now that I've said all this, right? What is bad karma? When we have a need to acknowledge our heartbreak and disappointment, whether it's something that we're on the receiving end of or something that we're dishing out. So, you know, like, beware of the causes that you make and what their impact is on the people you're invoking your causes on and on yourself. Some people don't realize the causes that they make can really and unnecessarily, like, mess with somebody's life. I'm not talking about like life as they know it. So I'm not talking about like livelihood or reputation, image, things of that nature. I'm talking about like their actual life. Sometimes the things you do can put someone's life at risk. And I think that's ultimately like the most negative calls you can make, is to put somebody's life at risk. But even that can be transformed. Like, if you actually cause someone to lose their life, directly or indirectly, for example, like, can that be transformed? Yes. Will it take a lot of time? Yes. Will you have the consequences to deal with? Yes. Like, and I'm using the most extreme example because I want to convey the power of, like, being able to transform anything without exception. Like that was the Buddhist belief, and that got obscured over the years of like as Buddhism expanded and was you know, was exposed to from Nepal, India, to China, to Japan, to the West. And there's one more quip that I'll cycle about Buddhism like toward the end. But as Buddhism expanded, this concept got lost again because a lot of cultural norms are patriarchal. And, you know, like, patriarchy likes to distort shit, you know, period. Like, it just does. It's gonna be like, okay, so how can we make the man at you know, the top of the food chain and everything that we do? So you know, within Nichiren Buddhism, from the 13th century sage Nichiren, who studied all the Buddhist teachings and like basically was able to confirm like, okay, no, this is what the Buddha meant when he was talking about this is how Buddhism is to be approached. This philosophy is to be approached. He was able to clarify, okay, no, everyone without exception has the potential for Buddhahood. So even when you are making negative causes, you have a relationship with the mystic law of cause and effect. So even your negative causes that create negative effects can later on bring you to a more positive outcome if you don't avoid it. If you acknowledge the pain, right? I'm sorry if this is like, this whole lesson is not the most, you know, I don't know. I like learning, and I like to share what I have learned, you know, over the course of my life. So I think it's just like, I take it seriously. I don't want to just say like, oh, avoid bad karma, avoid doing shitty things. I mean, yeah, that's what the fuck you're supposed to do. You're supposed to avoid doing shitty things. You're supposed to avoid being a shitty person. Like, duh. But it's not enough for me to just simply say that and then like move on. Like, we have to really break down in like what karma is and what good and bad karma is. Like, even your bad karma can lead you to a positive outcome if you are accepting of, you know, the effects based off the causes that you made. And then also to able to have the capacities to be like, okay, I don't want to live my life like that. I don't want to, like, that's the best way to not have bad karma. Ideally, is to simply, like, not live your life a certain way that is going to make you susceptible to that. But then the next best way is just learning from your mistakes, learning from, you know, the actions that were taken that were perhaps, like, not the best actions, and being radically accepting of it. Surrendering, you know, there is an element of surrender when you are at a crossroads, you know. But ultimately, when one is able to do all those things, then you're able to ask yourself, okay, what is value creating? How can I create value for my life? You know, that's ultimately the question. Because I am so tickled that this shit came back around 3 days in a row. So let's analyze this from a different perspective. I think we kind of went over the limelight aspect of it, but let's go over the audience aspect of a spotlight, because that's the whole point of a spotlight, is for the audience to kind of direct their attention somewhere, right? Spirit is saying that there is a stalking element to this limelight, like stand. Sometimes we have stands. How do you deal with that in this day and age? That requires creative solutions. That requires us using our Mercury and Neptune trine transit right now. Like, how do we deal with like the fact that we each have an audience, like, as indicated perhaps online by the number of followers you have, or even if one doesn't have like that many followers, like if you are known to somebody in real life and you develop a relationship with them, a friendship with them, or it's your family, they're gonna check on you, one way or another. Even if we remove the online element of this completely, if you got somebody that loves you, you have an audience. If you have somebody that hates you, you also have an audience. So, you know, like, someone's always going to be paying attention, or, you know, have the possibility of paying attention at any given moment. So I think it just ultimately, comes down to, like, what type of action are you taking? What type of causes are you making? You know, ideally, yes, you want to stay away from bad karma, but, you know, I think no one is going to learn something worth its salt on this earth without making one mistake. You get what I'm saying? So I think it's an important thing, like, when you have a spotlight, though, to own it. If you have a spotlight on you, own that shit. Own that shit. Don't let anybody else, like, for example, if I'm a person, I told y'all the other day, I like light therapy. There's certain colors that I like. Well, I have my party lights on, like, that's fine. But if it's like, if I had to choose just like one color, hey, yo, I am going to want a purple spotlight. Now, if I want a purple spotlight and the lighting person deliberately ignores my request for a purple spotlight and then puts on a red spotlight, I'm gonna have a fucking problem with that. Because I asked you for one thing, and that's to put on my purple spotlight, because I like purple spotlights. Don't let anybody change your purple spotlight to a red spotlight, okay? Don't let somebody from the audience who don't know what the fuck they're doing like put you in a place of, like, not being shown in the light that is authentically you. Don't let anybody distort your spotlight, right? Or try to take your spotlight for their own. Even worse. You get what I'm saying? Like, let these people not. Just not. Oh, I just realized I put cards in the wrong place. Okay. Tarot cards, we already went through those. Okay, so moving on to our Dark Confessions Oracle. My mask keeps me safe. I need to fake my feelings. Somebody trying to be a ghost? Whether this is you or somebody that's in your life, like, I'm not about to sing mask off either. I'm not about to future it up right now, but, like, take the fucking mask off, G. Like, I don't know why there's a lot of people in this world who just, like, will wear a mask. Have time to be fake. One of the things I realized now, being back in Wisconsin, is what I appreciate about being from here is that you can kind of get a read on somebody pretty quickly. Like, you don't gotta deal with the transactional nature of people. You don't gotta deal with the mask. Like, motherfuckers are gonna, like, just be who they are. They're gonna show you who they are, and it's like, that's good. I can deal with that, you know. I appreciate that, and that's the kind of way I've approached life. Like, you know, I don't know, and it's just like, every city has its own karma, you know, based off of its nature, based off of the industries that are prominently present. So yeah, it's giving very much that someone feels the need to wear a mask because they don't want to confront the challenging feelings. They don't want to confront the likelihood of having to, you know, face the things that they're not comfortable facing. Maybe they don't want to acknowledge how they really feel or what they did, so they gotta wear a mask because they don't want to go through this. Don't be that person. Because you end up doing more damage that way. Hold yourself accountable so other people don't have to hold you accountable. Is what I'm getting at with that dark confessions with this. I need to fake my feelings. Moving on to our angelic connections. This was a heavy read today. Thank y'all for like sticking with me. At times, you may receive a series of favors or unexpected gifts for no apparent reason. The angels are here to remind you that you are deserving of all good things. Yes, you are. Like, when you are not engaging with the mask behavior, the shadow hermit behavior, you are facing your 9 of Swords energy, you know, face the challenges to get through to the healing. That's where your angels come in, because they're like, okay, they're willing to do the work. They're willing to confront their problems or confront their issues. We need to reinforce. We need to remind them. And in Buddhism, there's some equivalent of like angelic forces. It's called Shoten Zenjin. And it's like, you know, the universe's protective forces as manifested through human beings, human entities. You know, so it's like even on Earth, we can have these angelic connections. Somebody can do us a solid that it could be life-changing, could be just very helpful. Somebody could come in and a clutch, you know? Yes, like, you're gonna have these angelic forces, these protective forces around to remind you in life, like, hey, you're worth it. Even when we're, like, dealing with, like, bad karma, you know? Or challenging karma. You know, it could be karma of our making, it could be karma from a past life. You know, our understanding of karma is both, it should be both in containment within this lifetime and also over the course of previous lifetimes, if you're open to that concept. But yes, you're very deserving of the gifts that this world has to offer. So remind yourself of that. Okay. So it's time for our timing oracle. And based off of what we've learned today, we have our 6 of Cups. We have our, you know, the sense of nostalgia that's no longer serving us. The past is not the present. Our 3 of Swords energy, our Hermit energy, 9 of Swords. The spotlight. When will the spotlight go off? You know, like, every show must end. You get what I'm saying? Every phase of our life must move on into the next. So the fact that the spotlight keeps coming out, this is the 3rd day in a row, like, that light bulb eventually got to burn out. So, like, when I say, like, when will the spotlight go off? It's like, you know, when will we learn what we have to learn from this situation or this period so that we can move on? So, shuffle. Let's see where we get to. And I know this is today's, like, officially, like, the longest read that I've ever done. I told myself I would not go over 45 minutes because I think, like, the other day it was like 42 and things like that. I don't know. I'm not trying to be here forever, and I know neither are you, but I'd rather give a thorough read than to rush. And then, you know, if there's more that I could have said to be more helpful, then it's great, you know. But this channel is still up and coming. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already. Please. Share with a friend. I promise you it will not be an hour every day. I try to, like, keep it under 30, really. I don't know. But something about talking about karma. It's the Buddha in me. Okay. So, when will we move on from the spotlight transit? When will we see the spotlight move off or turn off? When will we learn what is needed to learn in this era? The time is now, guys. Okay, so what I take this to mean yes, now implies like the current moment, right? But the current moment, but it doesn't give like a finite time frame for what necessarily is now. So the spot, which basically means the spotlight is going to be on for as long as it needs to be on until we learn what we need to learn. Does it mean that it's going to keep coming every single day until maybe we may get a different card finally from that broken mirrors deck perhaps tomorrow, maybe, I don't know. I'm not the type of person where it's like, oh, we already did that card, so let's not do it today. No, if certain cards repeat, there's a reason for it, and we need to kind of sit with that and just come at it from a different angle each day until we get what it is that we need to learn from it. If the spotlight is on us, then make the best of that shit. Make it look good, you know? So that you can just like shine. Like the spotlight is for you too. It's for you to find your way. It's not just for the audience to like just keep track of where you are on the stage at any given moment. It's for you too. It's for you to shine. So like, shine, baby. Like, be fabulous. You're deserving of figuring out exactly how fucking powerful you are. It does take struggle. It does take heartbreak and disappointment. But when we embrace that shit, that's how we get the time to play and to explore. So here's the last thing I leave you with before I wrap this up finally. So in Buddhism, the specific Buddhism I practice is, the primary practice is chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, which is a mantra. It's the Japanese pronunciation of Chinese characters that were a translation from Sanskrit. Sanskrit is like the original writing system that was used when writing systems became present to write down what was orally passed on from generation to generation about the Buddhist teachings, right? So Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Nam means like from namaste, like dedication or devotion. In this case, it's I dedicate. Myoho means mystic law. I dedicate my life to the mystic law. Renge means cause and effect. And Renge is also the name for the lotus flower. The lotus flower is like pretty cool because it's one of the only flowers that can, bear fruit and like have seeds at the same time, or blossom and have, bear fruit at the same time. So that symbolizes the simultaneity of cause and effect. I know we talked about cause and effect earlier, but really every cause that we make is the effect of something else at the same time, and every effect that we experience is the cause of something else at the same time. So the simultaneity of cause and effect, I dedicate my life to the mystic law of cause and effect. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Kyo means through sound or through teaching. So put that all together. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. I dedicate my life to the mystic law of cause and effect through sound or through teaching. So it's a pretty profound mantra, and even for that translation being pretty rough, it's like pretty dope, understanding the mystic law. What is the mystic law? It is the law of the simultaneity of cause and effect. It's also like why we say like you can tap into Buddha. Everyone has the potential to tap into your Buddhahood, because there's also a concept called 3,000 realms within a single moment of life, meaning that from one moment, like you have the potential to go any sort of way, you could transform even the worst of circumstances into the greatest of circumstances. You get what I'm saying? With this type of philosophy. But I wanted to share that aspect because of what I'm about to say too. You know, in my journey of like having a better understanding of how all world religions lead back to Africa, because I'm so Alkebulan. I'll even say like the Africa is like the Greek, I believe, name for the continent. Those who are from the continent knowing the native name is Alkebulan. Okay, so in Alkebulan, a lot of the languages that are spoken like are under the category of Bantu, right? Which is like the mother tongue and like all of the languages that are under that umbrella of Bantu, have some etymology that stems back from that, you know, original language. One of those Bantu languages is Chichewa or Niger. Both of them refer to that same specific style of language. So I have a friend, I won't say her name, but a friend that I met earlier this year while out in Los Angeles, who is from South Africa. And so I'm like sharing Buddhism with her, and she's just like, okay, well, how do you pronounce it? And so I'm saying, hey, it's Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. She was just like, do you know what that means in my language? I was like, tell me, please fucking tell me. So, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, right? Namoyo. Namoyo in Niger means I'm alive. Murenge. Murenge means create. Kyo, to it. I'm alive, create to it. I'm alive, create to it. I know, like, it sounds like a choppy Google Translate, but also not everything translates into English well. But it's still a full expression in Chichewa, in Niger. That almost broke my brain. I was so profoundly shaken to have the understanding that, you know, even before the historical Buddhist time, this had been an expression present, an essential, a mantra present. You know, you get what I'm saying? I know that there's, you know, like oh, the Buddha was a black man, or, you know, a dark man, and yeah, facts, you know. Like, I think just having this shift alone in my life has brought a lot more grounding in my practice, and also in the expansion of my points of spirituality. So, I'm alive, create to it. When she and I talked about it a little later on, she's like, you know, it's kind of mystic how, like, one minute we could be here, 1 minute we could be there, we could be anywhere in the universe, but we're alive and we're creating to, you know, that next point. And I think it just coincides very beautifully with, you know, that rough translation of Nam Myoho Renge Kyo from the Sanskrit. I dedicate my life to the mystic law of cause and effect through teaching. Like, it's like peeling back these layers. I'm alive, create to it. I don't know. There could perhaps be a better translation or a better way of translating the Niger expression of Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, the Chichewa expression of Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, Namoyo Murenge Kyo. But, okay, this is capping off at an hour. I'm signing off. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you. Be sure to like, subscribe, share. I intend to do this daily. I intend to also not take an hour, but this one was worthwhile, and just sharing what I was seeing. So thank you again. Ciao.